first we want to start off with Michael Stein. Michael, you're here, right?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so let's just get started with your conversation, which is bricks to bytes, instruction during a pandemic. Yeah, it's good to have you. So we're going to give you this full next half hour, so share away, and then I'll be watching comments and questions so we can interrupt you. And of course, I'll have a million. I always do.
Basically, thank you for having us or having me come out and speak with you all today. Just kind of sent this into you by having a conversation with one of the gentlemen there with you and by email, and how it is that we've gone about dealing with things from the standpoint of what happened last spring from the regards to the pandemic and how it impacted us as a school. And as we all know, we were all in person, and as soon as that lockdown hit, everything went virtual. We went through basically 4 different phases, if you will, to where we currently are right now in regards to the way that we're delivering instruction. And obviously we know as in person, we were able to do traditional classes and have the students in, and we are a technical trade school. So we are very hands-on in regards to how our students learn, and the teachers and the delivery models and how they go about their day. Particularly other things when it comes to special ed and assisting students and getting them through what it is that they're learning. And that really had a deep impact when we went into what was that 100% virtual, because everything closed down. When we transitioned from there, we had all sorts of logistics that we had to deal with in regards to our buildings being closed, making sure that everybody had equipment and able to access everything online. And we were in a pretty decent situation because we had already about 2 years prior transitioned into a full-blown learning management system for all the students. Everybody already had logins. Everybody was already kind of established in the system, but it really wasn't something where we were using it exclusively, because there was still a lot of hands-on in-person instruction going on in that sense from that in-person instruction. So that virtual was kind of sudden and really changed the way that we had to look at things in regards to how we delivered that instruction. As we opened up into this year, things loosened up a little bit. And some of our schools began to embrace more of a hybrid model of instruction where students were coming into class and also learning online. And for us, that sort of worked out as well, because we now were able to attend to the hands-on portion of what it is that we instruct when it comes to our in-classroom instruction that we were really lacking in the spring. So it really was an improvement from all virtual, but it still wasn't ideal, because we had students that were not able to participate in a collaborative manner that we were accustomed to working on when it came to theory-based instruction and providing that information. So as we kind of moved through the fall, what we began to do is explore how we could take all of that hybrid instruction and get everyone more in alignment with delivering that instruction to our students so that it was more sequential, so that everyone was getting everything at the same time. And what we did is we got to the point where we were teaching everything both in the classroom and teaching everything at home, live, in person, online, and in person synchronously for all the students, as opposed to what was with virtual. It may have been asynchronous. Here's a homework assignment, here's a reading assignment, here's a video to watch, and there wasn't a lot of interaction. As we kind of progressed and we got into what we're calling the HighFlex or concurrent instruction model, we then were able to have all the students collaborate at the same time, whether they were at home or whether they were in the school itself. And the reason that we had to do that is because we, as a school of choice, we had students coming in from our sending districts from at all sorts of different timeframes. We have 16 different sending districts that send to us, and they went into hybrid instruction at their schools. So they only had certain students in the buildings and certain students not in the buildings at a certain time. So if you can see that chart there now, I'm not asking you to read it, but you can see there, every one of those cells is one of the different 16 districts and how they split up their alphabet and whether they were in attendance during Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it was very chaotic in regards to trying to understand who was going to be with us and who was not going to be with us during that instructional period. So this emphasis on trying to teach the students at home and in person the same content at the same time really became important. So how do we go about doing all of that? We had to make sure that we had all of our equipment, our software, all of the training that we had to provide for our staff and everything in place. And we concentrated on all of that throughout the spring going into the summer, planning for the idea that this might happen coming in the fall. We did a whole bunch of different summer trainings for our instructors so that they were understanding how to utilize the technology, whether it came to using the broadcast software, to using different tools to get the students to collaborate. And we also didn't exclusively hold that training only for our staff and our faculty, but there was also training that the faculty and faculty provided to the students, and also evening trainings that we provided for parents. So we also provided that support when it came to learning how to use our tools and learning how to check grades and everything else, because it wasn't just the teachers and the students that were impacted, it's also the families and the parents. So when it came to getting to that point and how we were going to deliver all that, like I said, we really started to hone in on a bunch of different technologies and methods to deliver that instruction. As I had mentioned before, we had a learning management system. We're using Schoology. We also have Office 365, which is managing all of our students and their communication, email, and so on. And with that, we were able to take all of that and blend that together and use an online platform where we use Schoology conferences and Office 365 Teams and other publisher curriculum and so forth, and delivered all that instruction with the students that were in person and also the students that were at home. We handled that by getting equipment. We provided each instructor with a specific webcam that they were able to use that was portable. They could move it around their labs, and we also trained them up, like I said before, on the software when it came to screen recording and that broadcasting software. Some of the other instructors, or some of the instructors, also embraced a lot of our online learning software when it came to interaction with things like Quizlet, Edpuzzle, Kahoots, and all sorts of different things as well. So I have a couple of things, we'll get into this when it comes to these case studies. When it came to the camera and how we taught, our Schoology conferences and teams enabled us to do all of this live interaction and teaching through our webcams. Now, we got a hold of these Logitech HD cameras, and I can also let you know that when this all happened in the spring, all the companies that made web cameras became very popular and supply became limited. And it was interesting to see how many schools throughout the country were beginning to hit up these manufacturers for equipment to do this broadcast technology. The way that we basically do this is we set up so that the classroom had the same type of schedule that they had when they were in person. They still had to log in at the time in which that course would start. They then provided their teaching, as you can see in the photo, to the students that were in person. And also, as you can see in the background, there were students that were logged in and up on screen and participating with the theory with the instructor in class. And that was all broadcast through that camera. Daily check-ins for attendance were always there. In regards to keeping everything moving along, by having everyone in the class at the same time, it enabled that cohesiveness. Another method that was used by many instructors for students who may have had conflicts with our schedules, because some of our sending districts didn't adhere to the daily schedule. They were more autonomous with when the teacher would require the students to log in. If there was an algebra class that may have had 4 sessions throughout the day, that teacher might have only taught that session once and had all of the algebra kids kind of attend during that time period. And that kind of ran into conflict with our schedule as well. So many of the instructors would record their sessions and put them up online for either remediation or to watch them off hours, so that they could get that content. And one of the ways that we provided that so that the instructors would know that the students would watch the videos is through something called Ed Puzzle, where they would then integrate the questions and check for understanding as they go through the videos, and the teacher can see whether or not they had completed them based upon the feedback that they would get in the gradebook. And that gradebook automatically linked everything back into our Schoology LMS, which linked into our student management system and took care of all of our grading. Another thing that we had was teachers going through and creating that collaboration through online discussion boards. Many of the teachers would, what we would traditionally have called before flipping the classroom and putting something out online for the students to learn at home, and then have them come into the classroom and discuss and talk about that in the classroom and in that collaborative sense. It almost kind of now became reversed, where we were back to doing instruction when we had the instructors in the classroom and doing everything. And a lot of dialogue and discussion, for the sake of time, would have been held also online. So they could collaborate and discuss things and work on things at all sorts of times throughout the day, and wouldn't be regimented only to that specific class period. Another one that really had taken off with many of our instructors is integrating Quizlet Live within the classroom. And this was great when it came to the teachers running an in-class class with the at-home students at the same time, because it completely, as the students worked on their computers in the classroom and they worked on the computers at home, completely integrated them into the same space, even though they were in different locations. So the students were able to collaborate and compete against each other when they were doing different types of competitions in regards to how they would answer questions and kind of race to the end of that challenge. And it was actually somewhat more interactive than when they were all in person doing different types of activities, because it became so competitive. There were a lot of interesting moments where you saw students that would get really excited and start carrying on and challenging each other. And that banter that was going on was equal to, if sometimes even more than, when they were all in person. Another way that we kind of facilitated that learning process from at home and also in the classroom is, if the teacher were doing some sort of a demonstration in person, they would also prep and put together take-home kits that the students would take home, knowing that there was going to be a particular theory class or hands-on practicum that they were going to be able to take these materials home and do from their home. Now, we did have some limitations. Anything that was going to require supervision because of safety and everything else, that wasn't going on. But when it came to more basic items, particularly like here, let's just see an example here with health occupations, properly putting on gloves, doing bandage wraps, different types of things. Also the same with our other course that you saw a moment ago with our sports medicine and rehabilitation course. All of these kits put together were very easy for the students to take home, because it was all materials that they would have been using in the classroom as well anyway. When the students would work on those things at home, through their activities, they could record videos, they could take photos of their work and supply that to the instructor for demonstration of their competency, and things could get graded. So we did as much as we could to keep things moving along and keeping the kids moving forward with their education. As a result of all that, we really saw a surge of activity in what we were doing as the teachers became more familiar with what they were working on in the online environment. Our spring virtual days exploded in regards to the number of activities and things that were created, viewed, and graded. And we have a school, we actually have 2 buildings, and we have a population of about 1,700 students. And in that time period between March and June, or the beginning of the pandemic and the end of the school year, we had over 400,000 items being viewed, 18,000 plus course materials being created by instructors, and over 70,000 items submitted and graded by those instructors. After going through all that summer training, about the same amount of time period, coming into the fall. They really stepped up and increased that and increased their productivity with what they were putting out there with the students, approximately almost about 20% through their preparation going into this HighFlex. So now we had students in person and also online, and we had an increase in the content and the amount of materials that everyone's going through. So that was just kind of and some insight as to what it is that we're doing and what we were doing as a career center, and providing that kind of transition and growth from in-person instruction over into the hybrid HighFlex type environment. They asked me to speak for about 20 minutes. I think that it was about 15 now, 20 minutes here. So if there's any questions that anyone has, I'd like to open up the space if anyone has similar experiences or things that they would like to contribute to the discussion.
Well, that was awesome. What a feat, right? So I'm going to be watching for other questions, but I want to ask you a few myself, if you don't mind.
That's perfectly fine. Thank you.
You know, the moving to a hybrid logistics, which is what you're calling it HighFlex. There is a lot of logistics in it. Can you talk a little bit about how that got organized? You know, what students wear, or does it matter? And you know, the basics of like the plotting of your schedule.
Yep. So there is actually, this is a multi-part presentation that we've actually put together for something else. So to go back into some of those, which is more the administrative directives and the things that we were looking at from the standpoint of what the expectations for the students were and everything else, we really stuck to the same type of expectations that they had with in-person learning. The students had to log in by a certain time. Their expectation for dress was that they were we had some programs that required them to even dress in the material that they would be dressing in the classroom. So for instance, cosmetology would put on their cosmetology, they'd have their smocks, or whatever, I don't know what they call them exactly, their robes. Some of the other classrooms required them to, you know, participate as though they were in class, but everyone was expected to be, let's say, business casual, if you will. You know, we did have a number of issues in the beginning where there were students that were half in bed and not really wanting to, you know, participate in a more workplace environment. But we really, because of being a career center, stressed the need for them to be presenting themselves as though they are still at work, or they're going to work, just like they do when they're coming into the classroom. Because just like we are, and when we're working online and remote and how we're doing things, we can't just show up and work in our pajamas and do things and, you know, and such, because we have to be presentable and, you know, still continue to be professionals. We translate that into the same thing for the kids and those expectations. So we actually do have something built into our grading schema, which is something called work ethic. So our students do actually have a skin in the game in regards to whether or not they participate in that professionalism and with that professional mannerisms and dress and everything else, because we do hold them accountable grade wise for that component.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So I have a question here from Gus. I'm going to find him and allow him to ask you himself, because there's like 4 parts to his question. So Gus, do you want to unmute and go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned teachers creating their own instructional materials near the end of your presentation. How was that experience? Was each teacher responsible for their own materials creation, or was a central committee making the decisions on that? Were existing materials adapted for this HighFlex model?
So in our environment for the Career Center, every one of our programs already, and this has been, we have something called learning guides and scope and sequence for how we go about creating learning materials in the career world. And our instructors are already required to create their own instructional materials. They beg, borrow, and steal, if you will. They may sample and use something from what might be a publisher's curriculum or some kind of trades training materials and different things of that sort. But when it came to then translating that over into the online environment, that is kind of where I spent most of my time as a technology integration coach, working with all the instructors and building all those things out. So luckily for us, like I had said in the beginning, I had started that transition for a couple of years of us moving into a digital-based curriculum environment. And when this occurred, we had the foundation established already to kind of handle this. And so when we moved into completely online, it was just a matter of everyone now stepping up and providing that same material now just in that online environment. And one of the fastest and easiest ways to accomplish that was the transitioning into the camera model where they were doing live instruction through the camera. I think the biggest hurdle really in the beginning for us was, and that would be our IT department and working with our sending districts to get everybody with a take-home computer and access to the internet. That was the biggest hurdle in the beginning back in March.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks, Gus. So I have another question for you then. It might be something you've already observed, or maybe you need to sort of start watching this particular part, but what's been the traffic? Because in our experience, as we're watching attempts to do hybrid everywhere, we're hearing the amount of digital traffic on individual teachers is huge. Lots of email back and forth, lots of checking in systems, loading things in systems, pulling things down from systems, grading in systems, parents calling in, all kinds of traffic. So what's your experience with that so far?
There's a lot of interaction there, and we have a couple of different avenues that they can participate in that. We have obviously your traditional email. There's also InMail that's inside of the learning management system with using Schoology. I would kind of almost offshoot and kind of state something that kind of makes me think about what happened back in the spring. Is more of the concern was we would be running into our providers, i.e. Schoology and the learning management systems, began to have so much traffic last spring that they began to deteriorate their services because they couldn't handle all the traffic. So that's where we had more, let's say, problems where certain features wouldn't work for a couple of days and then they would turn back on and be working again and different things of that sort. But when it came to the communication and venues for talking to the teachers, to the students, to the parents, and so forth, that really didn't change much because we really didn't have a lot of in-person communication with families at home. It was always email and phone call and so forth in the past. Mm-hmm. What we had now is, not that we encouraged it, but a couple of times we had some parents that would, let's call it family bomb into the presentations and join into the video lessons and converse with the teacher kind of on the side. And they would have, they could pull out and have a breakout conversation or set up a meeting with that instructor or that family member together outside of the classroom, conference-wise and so forth, because the students would facilitate that at home because they knew the technology. Sometimes the parents wouldn't. So that's part of the issue too, is that the parents weren't up to speed with how to use everything. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to watch the juggling that goes on with regards to that, because, the traditional classroom was so much different. You were directing attention in a manual sort of analog way, and now you're directing attention digitally, and it can fracture all over the place with kids going digitally with their attention in different directions. So it's a totally different sort of teacher discipline traffic area.
And it took some time to get where the students were accustomed to the new environment. When it came to attendance, the attendance was horrible in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really think it was real. They thought this was not going to be the way things are. If I just wait this out, maybe this will be changed. I'll be back in school again. And as time went on, this became more normalized. We watched and through some of the structures of requiring them to be there, work ethic wise, grading and everything else, daily check-in questions, all sorts of different things that kind of would, let's say, tease them back into the classroom, if you will, online every day. Attendance began to improve. And as we know, the attendance improves, so does the productivity, and the students' performance improved as well. But it's nowhere near where we really would have been if we were always in person.
Yeah, that's the difference. So what about the whole group aspects? So you have students who didn't make it online. Maybe they want to watch the video later, like you mentioned. What is your consideration about retaining whole group? Do you need to retain whole group indefinitely if a lot of what can be accessed, is digital now, even the recordings of lectures? What about fracturing that map and then causing auto cohorting as people move through? Because that's part of the discussion the Learning Council is looking at with hybrid logistics, is what about the Uberization of the teaching intersection to be based on pace? And
for us, we are kind of already live in that environment. Mm-hmm. For each of our courses, we actually have 3 levels of students. So let's just say that it's a horticulture classroom. We have 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students in that same class. So we are already fracturing, if you will, the smaller, or that whole entire class into smaller groups. And as you start diving in, because of our nature and how that we do things, we are very focused on individualized learning. So students can learn somewhat at their own pace. Now, the delivery of what we're doing still is kind of beholden to, there's only so many hours in the day. So the teacher has to do what they need to do when they do, based on a certain schedule. Yeah. But within the learning management system, we are able to assign an entire unit of information to the students with a end due date, and they can work through those at a certain pace. What I'm really missing and looking forward to is when they get to a certain point and they finish things off, that now it branches and opens up different types of curriculum for them, and then they can go into different things by choice as opposed to by direction. But the technology isn't quite there yet. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. So very interesting, very proud of you. This is really progressive work and excellent. And I want to hear more, and maybe next time we get to talk to you, we'll hear some more of the details of what's happening over there. But thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Brightspace is a learning management system that makes it easier for you to give each student a more personalized learning experience. And now you can do it with fewer headaches and in less time. It's one platform with a single sign-on to all the tools you need that works on any device and can be used to create a different experience for each grade level. The youngest students can use a portfolio specifically built for non-readers to share what they're learning. As they get older and busier, the activity feed shows them the latest updates to help them keep track of everything that's going on. And no matter what grade your students are in, it's simpler than ever to create lessons and check that content is aligned to standards. You can use materials from publishers, open educational resources, or bring them in directly from Google Drive. The social interface brings it all together in a way that's easy for anyone to use and keeps everyone connected: teachers, students, and their parents. With Brightspace, you'll be able to reach every learner in a way that supports their learning style.